you know, every deal sounds great on paper, but there are monumental obstacles that still remain that Hamas and Israel have to work through in later stages of this 20-point agreement, like Hamas so far refusing to give up its arms, how much land Israel will ultimately occupy, occupation itself, and of course the path to Palestinian statehood. So having said all that, is there still room for optimism with this first stage of this agreement?
Well, thank you very much for having me on the program. Anyone who's been around the Middle East for some years will recognize the feelings that have been expressed tonight. I'm afraid over the years we have seen a number of opportunities for hope, and they've only been dashed in the medium and longer term. I think, however, what might be different about this is firstly that this first phase deals with the immediate concerns. If it brings a ceasefire, the exchange of hostages and prisoners, the delivery of aid, that is the immediate needs and the immediate demands of many involved. And then if that is a success, and if the president has committed himself to it, then there is a chance of going further. His endorsement is very important. His ability to have confronted Prime Minister Netanyahu, particularly after the attack in Qatar, has been very significant, and he will not want this to fail. So although, as all your correspondents have said, there are many difficulties ahead, and you've mentioned some of them just now, at least we seem to be on a pathway, and maybe, just maybe this time, it might be the right one.
Alistair, President Trump has been in office since January, and there are many who believe he could have stopped this war on day one. My question to you is, what finally triggered the president to put pressure on Netanyahu? You mentioned Israeli attack on Qatar. That perhaps played a role. There were also horrific scenes of hunger and devastation in Gaza, with Israel's growing isolation on the world stage. And of course, then there's his desire to win the Nobel Peace Prize. What ultimately led President Trump to put that kind of pressure and get directly involved in these negotiations?
Well, any and all of the above that you've mentioned. First and foremost, I think that the weariness of a conflict is often a factor in them coming to an end. The elements of this particular peace plan are no particular surprise to negotiators and mediators. They've been on offer for some time. The bit perhaps that you missed out was the domestic concerns in Israel that Prime Minister Netanyahu has prolonged the war for longer than it might have been, because he was determined to see it deliver his aims of the complete elimination of Hamas and the recovery of hostages by military means, neither of which proved to be viable. Of the 148 hostages that have been returned so far, 140 have been released through negotiation, not through conflict. And his own advisors suggested that going further into Gaza was not appropriate. So there's that element, which perhaps gave President Trump the sense that if he too told Prime Minister Netanyahu that he had to take a different course, he would be well supported. But I think a combination of factors, yes, Israel's position in the world has changed, despite the enormous support for Israel after the shocking and horrific attack against it on October the 7th, and no one should forget. The length of time, the scenes in Gaza, the hunger that the president reported and mentioned himself in interviews not too long ago. But I think it was the outrage faced after the attack on Qatar, which infuriated the Gulf states, Qatar itself, who'd done a lot in relation to negotiation. Perhaps that was one of the final straws. And remember, the president has a close relationship with the Gulf states. Everyone knows that a new Middle East can only emerge if this conflict comes to an end, and indeed if there is eternal peace in relation to the Palestinians and the Israelis. And they will be hoping that this is a start on this.
And I have to ask you about new comments coming from Hamas's chief negotiator, Khalil al-Hayya, who says the group has received assurances and guarantees that the war has in fact ended. So I think there's a difference here between a temporary truce or a ceasefire and what Hamas wants, which is a complete declaration that this war has ended, do you see that as being an issue just by signing the document that needs to be signed and the wording?
My understanding is there's dispute about the wording. Again, it's been known for some time that Hamas wanted to see an end of this conflict only if it guaranteed a permanent peace, the removal of Israeli forces from Gaza. The Israelis saw it differently. Their security was so affected by the attack on October the 7th that they are very fearful of a Gaza where they don't have a degree of security control. You mentioned disarmament earlier, the decommissioning of arms, that is a key factor. On what terms will there be a permanent ceasefire? These questions have all got to be answered, and got to be answered for the benefit of both sides, who feel there's a risk to their security unless there are serious guarantees. So we'll have to see what sort of guarantees come forward, either from an international force or from the President of the United States himself.
And Alistair, finally, what's going to happen if hostilities break out again? In fact, Gaza came under Israeli attacks even today. So if phase one of this agreement does not go well after just a few days, what happens then?
If this agreement is broken, I think, firstly, if the President of the United States can identify who and what has broken it, then I think he's made very clear his intention, either in relation to Hamas to allow Israel to continue its attacks, or if Israel breaks the truce, I think there will be further repercussions against Israel. The situation in the United States is not the same for Israel as it used to be. The President knows that amongst his MAGA core, there are now those who are extremely concerned about the conduct of the conflict and how Israel is now seen. So the President's total unquestioned support for Israel cannot be guaranteed. Now, if that's the case, then both Israel and Hamas know there is a risk if the conflict starts again. Perhaps the greater worry is what negotiators and mediators and we all call spoilers. That is, those who don't want to see an end of the conflict, not associated with either the government of Israel or Hamas, but want to create something that will cause this to fail. And that can only benefit those who do not have the interests of the people of Gaza or the people of interest at heart in the longer term.
Alistair Burt, thank you so much.
Thank you, Matt.